You're listening to the Gruntworkers Show, and I'm your host, James C. Zollman. Here's one of my favorite snippets from this episode.
They have to understand what these things are telling them and how they work, because any small mistake is literally fatal to the project. About a decade ago, a UK space exploration vehicle sent to Mars, instead of slowing down and landing on Mars, sped up and crashed into the planet because someone got a minus sign in the wrong place. Right? It's one character pretty much blew up $1 billion project and made it completely worthless. So this is the level of detail that they're working at, and they need to have the security in their tools. They have to be confident that these tools are doing what they're doing, and they only get that when the experience is transparent, clear, and understandable. So that's what we work on.
Hey, welcome to the Gruntworkers Show. I am so honored and thrilled to have an incredible, original user experience pioneer on the show today. He's going to talk on a variety of topics with us, specifically about how user experience is one of the primary tools that a CMO and marketing managers should be using in their toolbox, so to speak, of talent and skills. And he has worked with and developed strategic playbooks for the likes of Allstate, AutoTrader, Dell, Capital One, Sherwin-Williams. He is truly one of the original pioneers in the user experience space. I'm so honored to have you on the show today. Jared Spool, his official title is Maker of Awesomeness at Center UIE. Thank you, Jared, and welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here. Thanks for including me.
Wonderful. So I typically like to start the show with a question of, what are you working on right now? What's got you excited in the UX space in 2020?
Well, getting to the end of 2020 has got me excited.
I think a lot of people feel the same way.
The thing that we've been working on most strongly is we've been doing a lot of work around UX strategy, and we've created an online community for that and some online programs, and it has been a really good year sort of understanding the strategic implications of user experience. User experience people often think of as making something look good and making it easy to use and sort of focusing on just stopping there. But a good UX strategy actually helps you make sure your products are competitive, because you're really understanding the needs of the people who are going to buy it and who are going to use it, and that you are making the organization effective and efficient, because everyone's experience, whether they're a support person or a salesperson or a customer or user, they are getting the most out of the product or service. And so we've been working with all sorts of organizations like the ones you just mentioned to really make sure that they have the best experiences for their customers. And so, that we talk about this in a marketing framework. Marketing is all about bringing people to the product, making sure they understand what the product can do, understanding why they should buy it, the value of it. And the number one marketing tool that's the most effective way that products are marketed is not through advertising, not through email marketing or content marketing. The number one way is through people talking about it, their experiences, right? Think about your favorite restaurant. How did you find your favorite restaurant? Chances are you didn't look it up in the Yellow Pages and discover it that way. somebody told you about it is most likely, and what did they tell you? They told you they had an amazing experience there. Think about the last time someone referred a television show to you or a band or something. They talked about the amazing experience of that. And that's the most effective marketing that we have, because it comes from an authority we trust, and it's all about the experience. And so how do we get other people talking about it? Well, the number one step is we have to deliver a great experience. And so that's what we've been focused on for the last year is how do we make sure that the product or services that we're delivering are delivering the best possible experience, so that we can engage that number one marketing channel.
Wonderful. Absolutely. I wholeheartedly agree with you that word of mouth is the most powerful tool, and that only occurs if the user experience is phenomenal or
Right.
excellent. So that's great. How do you, if you walk into a room, sort of to pitch a scenario to you, Jared, if you walk into a room and it's full of marketing leaders and they are thinking of advertising marketing, and some of them do have inroads into the product creation process, which I think is smart for a lot of enterprise and even small businesses when they do that, when they realize that marketing is one of those executive roles that should be involved in that process a little bit, at the very least. What would you tell those marketers as far as maybe some of the most basic, most powerful principles that they can have at the edge of their mind as they're developing campaigns and working with their product teams and more?
Well, first, if you don't have a solid relationship with the folks building and delivering the products and services, you're not doing your job as a marketer. I mean, I think you're leaving a lot of money on the table if you're not doing it. If you're letting them produce whatever they produce, and then your job is just to figure out how to sell it, you're making your job harder, right? Yes. We should be selling things that people want, that people need, and it shouldn't be hard to figure out what that is, right? It should be, in a lot of organizations we work with, marketing doesn't get involved until the product's defined. There's this whole fear that if we tell the customer about it too early, if we tell marketing about it, if we tell sales about it, the customer will find out. And then if the customer finds out, they'll demand it earlier, and then all we can do is disappoint, because it's going to take us a while to build it. So we just keep it from them, right? It's this secret that happens in the back lab. And part of that is, marketing is so busy marketing the current stuff that they're not paying attention to what's happening in that back lab. They just hear the explosions every so often, and they go, "Oh, that's just the lab guys," and they leave it at that. But there's, they should be intimately involved, and they should be involved from the beginning. Because one of the things, a key part of developing any great user experience is to have substantive user research. And substantive user research is a comprehensive understanding of what problems the customer has and how they're going to solve those problems, and how our product could potentially help them solve those products, how our service could potentially help them solve those problems. And so we need to understand what that is. And the thing is that good marketing people, they're in the forefront. They are customer-facing researchers. They just don't know that. And they're not delivering that research to the people who need it, which is the product folks. So there has to be this relationship between the marketing team and the product development team to understand what that is. And it's not through surveys. It's not through some sort of net promoter score or some crazy metric like that. It's through just talking to people and seeing what's going on. Right. A lot of the work that we do is around being competitive. And one of the things we tell people is you shouldn't do a competitive analysis by lining up your product next to your competitor's product and seeing what features they offer and which ones you're missing, and then say, well, we have to offer that, because all you're doing is chasing them, and you don't know that they understand the customer's problem any better than you do. right? Because they're doing the same thing. They're lining up the product and seeing what you're doing and adding that in, and it just creates this cycle where everybody's just following everybody else. And someone once told me that they had a saying, which is, if all you're doing is chasing your customer, you spend all your time looking up their butt. And the fact is that we don't want to be chasing the customer. We want to be leading the customer. They should be looking up our rear end. So in order to be leading, we need to figure out what they're not doing. And so the way that we do competitive analysis, which is really a bit different, is we do competitive analysis by watching people actually experience our competitors' products and services. We go and meet the customers of our competitors, and we see what their experience is like, and we look for the places where it's frustrating, where it's difficult, where it's hard to use, because that's complete opportunity for us. If we can beat our customers or our competition by providing something that they're not, we get ahead of the game. And so that's the type of work that we've been doing with marketing folks, and it changes everything. It's completely game changing when we do it that way.
It sounds like it. It sounds like there's a paradigm shift that marketers can go through. In fact, it's happening to me right now, because in the marketing world and in the advertising world, we always try to create these swipe files. And that's that exact copy and the exact process that you're defining here of listing all the features and copying those features as best you can. That's kind of what a swipe file does for a marketer. They try to create the same marketing message, the same sales scenario to sell a similar product, because maybe that marketer doesn't understand exactly what the user is going through. And that's where I think getting a copywriter involved, getting a UX person involved can truly level up the marketer's ability to sell. And I think that's fascinating that you bring that up, because I feel like rather than thinking about the swipe file, it's thinking about how exactly are users using this or using our competitors, and it becomes more about the user. And I love that. That just, my mind, I feel like you've just blown my mind, Jared. I think that's awesome. And I think that a lot of our listeners will feel the same way. Earlier in the call, you mentioned a community for user experience designers and developers. Where would somebody go to join that? And do you allow marketers to learn from there, or is it more strictly for user experience developers?
Yes, it's open to anybody who wants to be leading the UX efforts in their organization, and that doesn't have to be a user experience developer. It can be anybody in the organization that feels that user experience is going to play a strategic role in how they succeed. And so it's definitely open for marketers. It's called Leaders of Awesomeness. You can find it at leaders.centercenter.com. Center Center is spelled CENTER. Don't need to go into much detail as to why that is, but the reality is that's the name of the website. So if you go leaders.centercenter.com, just think of it as the American spelling followed by the British spelling.
Yes.
You will find the community, and you can join it. And every week we do live videos and we answer questions, and every so often we run these things called intensives, which are 5-day workshops that are absolutely free, that go into some aspect of UX strategy, and it's very much focused at the strategic level. It's not in the nitty gritty of how do you get the right pixels and the right colors and the right things on the screen. It's really about how do we transform businesses to produce better design products and services.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I'll make sure that we get that in the description of the show. So Jared, can you tell us about the most powerful and most exciting user experience development projects that your company has ever done that was an incredible success? And how was that success defined?
Um, Well, so here's part of the problem. Really great user experience, if done well, is completely invisible, right?
That makes sense.
So
Yes.
it's sort of like the air conditioning in the room, right? If the air conditioning is working right, you don't think about it because the temperature is very comfortable and you go about your life and you're just moving on. You only think about the air conditioning if it's too cold or it's too warm or the air conditioning unit is dripping on you or making too much noise. Then you think about it, right? So it's only in when the experience is poor that we think about experiences in many instances. But when they're really well done, we don't think about them at all. We're thinking about the thing that we're trying to accomplish. And when we're talking about products and services that are tools or things that help us in our lives, it's accomplishing those things in our lives that we focus on. So the work that we do tends not to leave a lot of tracks. That said, one of the things that we're probably most famous for is we helped a major e-commerce company change a button and earn $300 million extra that year. And
Wow.
we've done a lot of things along those lines, but again, nobody noticed the change except for a handful of people inside the company and the finance team.
Absolutely. So that's how you measure it ultimately then, is the finance. Hey, people are using this seamlessly and a lot more because it fits into their lives to solve that problem. Is that what I understand?
Well, there's lots of ways to measure things, but certainly at the end of the day, if the business can't tell why we're doing this, why are we doing it? Right? So we have this basic, one of the core elements of a good UX strategy is something we call a UX outcome. Now, UX outcome is different than a UX output, right? So we want to focus on outcomes, not outputs. Outputs are things that we deliver, right? Every time we release a product, every time we ship something new, that's an output. And that's fine. We have to do those things. We should do those things. But that doesn't measure whether what we delivered was any good. It just says we delivered something. Mm-hmm. And if you've ever been on the receiving end of an update where you could not determine any benefit, but the update disrupted your life because they moved things around and it no longer worked the way it used to, that's just output. That's not outcome, right? An outcome is a change in your life. That's an improvement. So when we talk about a UX outcome is a simple question, right? If we do a great job on our product or our service or whatever this new thing we're working on is, if we do a fantastic job on it, how does it improve someone's life? We have to be able to answer that question. If we can answer that question clearly, for one thing, it's going to be way easier to market because we're going to market the improvement.
Absolutely.
And we'll be able to make a promise and deliver on that promise because we've built this thing to actually get that improvement. So if we market the something effectively, then or if we deliver something that's effective, we are in a good place to really be able to make marketing simpler. Mm-hmm. Right? If we're struggling to explain our products and services, the user experience is not good. Absolutely. Right? It should be absolutely clear what that outcome is. Mm-hmm. Right? Even if we have the world's most complicated product, right? One of my clients right now delivers cybersecurity intrusion detection systems. It's an incredibly sophisticated, complicated product, but we can talk about how it makes people's lives better. We can talk about how it protects company assets. We can talk about how it makes families feel secure. But one of the people that we're focusing on right now is actually the cybersecurity analyst. And we can talk about how we are making it easier for them to detect real threats and to not pay attention to false positives that take up their time but turn out not to be a real threat, and not miss false negatives that turn out to be real threats, but they pass them by because they don't look like they're threatening, right? So we can talk about those benefits, and we can talk about how we're making the security analyst job better. We can talk about how we're making the chief security officer's life better. We can talk about how we're protecting the corporate assets. We talk about all those things, and we can do it fairly simply because we have made a better experience, and a better experience basically simplifies things.
Mhm.
So we use the UX outcome as the driver, and you should be able to go through your roadmap, go through your product roadmap, every feature that the team is working on, and you should be able to say, how will this feature make someone's life better? How will this feature make someone? And if they can't answer it and you can't answer it, why are you working on it? Right? So the work that we do tends to be that way. Now, if you wanted, some of the more famous projects we've worked on include the user interface for trading on Fidelity's website. We've worked on the Magic Band at Disney parks. We worked on, I'm trying to think some of the other things. We work on so many things. We worked on stuff for NASA. We're currently working with the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. So, we work on a lot of stuff.
That's incredible. And each one is hyper successful because people don't know it's there, but the measurement or the metric sort of stems out of the UX outcome. Was that outcome achieved? And that's how you measure your success. Is that correct?
Yeah. So, for example, what we're doing with the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, we're working on internal tools. So this is not a product they're selling, right? The Jet Propulsion Laboratory, if you're not familiar with them, they are a part of NASA that makes little robots that are colonizing Mars, right? All those rovers and things that we send to Mars, that's the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. And we're working with the team that creates the tools that the software engineers and the systems engineers use for the rovers and for their satellites and their space exploration vehicles. And the thing about these things is that you can't do an in-field upgrade, right? Mm-hmm. Whatever goes to Mars has to have all the things it needs. It can't, and it's, if it shows up and it doesn't work, if it, you can't just unplug it and plug it back in to see if you can get it to work again. Yeah. So everything has to be there. So they have these really complicated systems, and the tools they use are really complicated. And what we're doing is working with the tool team to make sure that the engineers who are actually building the rovers and the space exploration vehicles can focus on that and not focus on their desktop suite of tools and which file goes here and how do they convert the file from this tool to that tool and all the sort of things that happen in the production of these things. And these projects are 10, 12 years old, right? I mean, it takes a decade to get a rover built and then ready to put into a rocket and then send it to Mars. And then it's another 2 years before it gets to Mars. And then the software runs for the first time, right? So we're looking at things that have really long time spans, and you have to have everything thought out. And we have to imagine today what the systems that are going to be going to other planets will be 12, 15 years from now. And so this is hard. You talk about a product launch. This is literally a product launch. And how do we make sure that system works perfectly and does everything it needs to do 15 years from now? That's the type of problem that we're focused on. And it's really fascinating type stuff. But the key thing here is, the people who are building these incredibly complicated tools, they can't be thinking about things that aren't the incredibly complicated tools. They can't be thinking about, how do I save this file? How do I do this type of calculation? That stuff has to be natural to them. The tools have to fit into their hands because they are master craftspeople, right? The tool has to fit into their hands and work naturally. Even digital tools like 3D modeling tools and systems diagrams and stuff like that, they have to understand what these things are telling them and how they work, because any small mistake is literally fatal to the project. About a decade ago, a UK space exploration vehicle sent to Mars, instead of slowing down and landing on Mars, sped up and crashed into the planet because someone got a minus sign in the wrong place. Right? It's one character pretty much blew up $1 billion project and made it completely worthless. So this is the level of detail that they're working at, and they need to have the security in their tools. They have to be confident that these tools are doing what they're doing, and they only get that when the experience is transparent, clear, and understandable. So that's what we work on.
That's absolutely incredible, Jared. And what's great about that is, even if it's internal focused, especially with a large organization like NASA or any enterprise, there's internal marketing and external marketing, but the internal aspect of that has a very, very public output, going back to output versus outcomes and outcomes. So both the output and the outcome are extremely public. And to win more budget or to win more dollars for their programs, they need to have that success, and it needs to look and feel natural and easy-ish, so to speak, to accomplish. So I imagine that multi-billion-dollar loss of a rover crashing into the planet, that was definitely bad PR and bad for the program for a few years, if not for many years afterwards. So
absolutely. I mean, space program in particular, Congress is always wondering, is this a good investment? Is this a good investment, right? And because these are a lot of tax dollars that are going into these programs, that it's not easy to see what the value is coming out. And as soon as there's any sort of tragedy and any sort of failure, that question of, are we spending our money well, becomes even a bigger problem, right? Yes. So the cost of failure in these projects is really high. It can be detrimental to the entire space program if we don't get them right every time.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, speaking of government, switching gears just slightly here, I noticed in your LinkedIn profile, you did some work on the U.S. Digital Service and consulting for them through the White House. What is digital like on the White House side? And what does the U.S. Digital Service look like from your perspective, from the UX side of things?
Yeah, so I was actually an employee of the White House.
Oh, you were an employee? Wow.
In 2015, 2016. Yeah, the president asked me to join President Obama, and so I joined his team and in the U.S. Digital Service. So, that's incredible. Yeah, when I worked in the White House, my manager's manager was the President of the United States, and we called him Barry. But
you must be on the inner circles to get to that point. That's awesome.
Yeah. I'm there were the thing about the executive office of the president is that there are 5,000 employees, right? So he doesn't quite remember everybody's name, but he knew why he wanted a digital service. So the digital service was an outcropping of healthcare.gov. So this was a classic example, right? So the first launch of healthcare.gov was a complete failure.
Disaster.
And it was a user experience failure that was a public embarrassment to the president and everything that he did, because he had worked so hard to get this program through Congress, and then bam, this thing just crashed. And it crashed because it created a bad user experience through technical issues. So he brought on a team. I wasn't part of that team. He brought on a small team of 13 folks, and they repaired it. They got it all back up and running in about 6 weeks, basically by rebuilding it from scratch. The original healthcare.gov was created by 300 government contractors, not individuals, companies, 300 companies, and none of them had coordinated.
Wow.
And 13 people went in and rewrote the whole thing and got it up and running. And as a result, since healthcare.gov has been up and running, they've brought insurance to more than 50 million people. But when that project finally succeeded, the president realized that he needed to have a digital team that understood technology, because government is having these massive digital transformations to move everything to be more modern, to be more online. And so, and that there were projects all over government that were about to fail, just like healthcare.gov did. So he created the US Digital Service. And I was brought in to help staff and bring that team up to speed. When I started, there were 22 people in the digital service, and the president had just announced it in the State of the Union address. And that evening, we got 2,000 applications for people to join, and we had the budget and money from Congress to staff it to 250 people, but we had to do that in 7 months before the new budget year. So we had to add 225 people in 7 months. And so my primary responsibility was working on the talent team, building the systems and processes to hire and bring in 225 of the best people in the country to be part of this digital services team, and to work with those people to deliver great online products and services that were from government, to make the citizen and the U.S. constituent resources be the best there could be. Everything from immigration and citizenship, working on the systems for that, to the Department of Education. Part of what we did was release something called the College Scorecard, which would tell you how successful graduates are from every college and university. So if you wanted to go into nursing, if you were thinking of going into nursing, you could see which schools had graduated the students who had the best salaries and had the most jobs. You could get all that data. So you could make sure that you were picking the right places to go to school, to learn the trade that you wanted to learn, to working with the State Department, to working with the FBI. It was really an amazing experience.
It's incredible.
Working on all these projects.
All within 1 year, within 12 months.
Yes.
That's amazing.
The thing about the digital service is everything moves quickly, and it's the hardest work I've ever done. It's just incredible.
That's amazing, Jared. Wow. Holy cow. That is such a cool experience. So let's do a little bit of throwback here. So Jared Spool gets into the White House because you are a pioneer in the UX space. How did you get started? How did you find this as a passion to develop it over such a storied career to end up in the White House and beyond? I mean, we're 4 or 5 years out of that now, and you're doing even bigger things, more incredible things, and continuing to define this incredible industry. What, if you could kind of condense that history, but let's definitely hit the highlights if you don't mind. I would love to hear this.
Well, it starts in the 70s.
Okay.
I started as a software engineer.
In the 70s even. So
in the 70s.
That's already being a pioneer. So
yes.
It's your MO to just pioneer amazing things.
Yeah, I mean,
the 70s.
It's one of these deals of I keep ending up being in the right place at the right time. It's I don't seek these things out, but I was very interested in the world of personal computers. And when the first personal computers came out, I mean, we're talking Apple IIs and TRS-80s and Altair 8080s, I actually shifted my programming work to be that, because I thought it was really cool to have these small computers that we could use for things. And this was back then, you know, if you were a doctor's office and you wanted to have a computer, you had to use some sort of service bureau and have professional programmers create custom software that you would help specify, that would basically be these systems. There weren't commercial packages available, and I got very interested in this sort of personal computer thing, because that seemed like that wasn't going to work that way. And in particular, when I started in computing, if you wanted to touch a computer, if you wanted to actually be the person who literally used it versus someone who just benefited from its use, you had to be a trained professional in that technology. You had to know how to program it, how to operate it, how to repair it, how to take it apart, put it back together. You had to know all these things. And of course, that worked fine when we were dealing with, large computer systems that organizations would spend hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars on. And but at the advent of the personal computer, that wasn't going to work, right? If we were going to sell millions of computers to individuals, we wouldn't be able to do this, right? To put things in perspective, when I started in the business, one of the first things I worked on was word processing. And at that time, the leading product in word processing was the Wang word processor. They actually trademarked the term word processor, but it became so generic that they lost the trademark, Wang Laboratories. And if you wanted to learn how to use a Wang word processor, you actually had to travel to Lowell, Massachusetts, where you would take a 1-week course to learn how to load a new file or load a file, how to save a file, how to print a file, and how to change the ribbon on the printer.
Wow.
If you stayed
that was
1 week long. If you stayed a second week for the advanced course, you learned how to do bold and italics.
Oh my goodness.
Yes. So that's what that was the state of the art of the technology at that time. And so we were working on these devices that could cost, that at scale could cost less than $2,000, possibly under $1,000. What would that be like? And we thought, there's no way, if you're going to spend $1,000 on the hardware, that a 2-week course where you learn basic primitive operations is going to be effective. So we had to start thinking about, well, how does someone literally walk up to this thing and just figure out how to use it? Mm-hmm. And so I ended up working on some of the first word processors and spreadsheets and email clients, and I accidentally invented voicemail, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do it. And if you have an old style PC keyboard, there's the what's called the QWERTY array, which is all the letters and the shift keys and the space bar, and then on the far side you have the numeric keypad, and in between those two things you have an inverted T set of arrow keys, and above those keys there are 6 keys, right? Page up, page down, home, and insert, delete.
Yes.
I designed those 6 keys.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Somebody had to do it.
Yeah.
I didn't set out. It wasn't like, I didn't say when I was like 4 years old, when I grow up, I want to design those 6 keys. It was just like, we were in a room and somebody said, well, what are we going to put on the keys? And we're like, well, let Jared do it. I'm like, okay, I'll do it. And so I did it. And we had lots of different variations, but that was what we ended up with. So anyways, I was just sort of there at the beginning. And
in the right place at the right time, like you said
in the right
before.
Place at the right time.
It's incredible. Did you have a degree before? Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt.
Nope. I was a self-taught software developer. I started programming in high school and just kept going.
I love that, Jared. Wow. So you invented the page up, page down, insert, and what were the other two?
Home end.
Home
insert,
end.
delete, home end.
That's right.
Yeah.
Wow.
So keys that are no longer on anybody's keyboard. But
I remember them. I mean, I didn't grow up in the 70s, maybe a little bit in the 80s, but yeah, wow.
You should have seen the do key. There was a key that we had that said do on it. D-O.
Huh.
And the idea was that if you had something where you typed in a command, instead of hitting return, you hit do. So that return worked like it does in a word processor. It always created new things. If you've been in some web interface and you hit return and it accidentally sends your message when you just wanted to create a new paragraph, that was why we created the do key. But the do key, for various reasons, got removed from the keyboard and never made it. It never became popular. And now we accidentally send messages when we don't mean to.
Yes, when we hit enter, right? That,
Yes.
that's incredible. I remember the do key because in my younger years, I would take apart computers in the early 90s that were from a hospital storage room just for fun, and they all had the keyboard attached. And I do remember playing with the do keys and DOS and a few other things, and that's incredible. I do remember those keys too, the page up, page down,
Yeah.
insert, home, end, and that's absolutely amazing. So that essentially gave you your first taste of user experience. Is that kind of where the impetus?
Yeah. So we were off trying to figure out, well, how will we make things that people could just figure out? And at the same time, the company that I worked for, Digital Equipment Corporation, they don't exist anymore, but they were a big leader at the time. They had hired a team of psychologists because someone, a specific person, a guy named Bill Zimmer, had this insight that, you know, psychology is going to be a big part of how we figure this stuff out. So they hired this team of cognitive psychologists, literally people who the week before they came to work for DEC, they were testing rats and in mazes, trying to figure out how the brain worked. And what we were going to do was figure out how do we design things that are easy to use, that are just feel natural, just feel intuitive. And how do we do that? And nobody knew at the time. And so now practices that we do, like A/B testing and usability tests and other things like that, those were all things we had to invent. And I was in the lab that helped invent these things, focused on building these personal computers. So they were off working on theory. I was trying to ship a product. And I needed their help to understand how to ship a product, and they wanted to help me because they wanted to learn how to make what they were doing practical and not just, you know, a bunch of guys with lab coats and clipboards. So so we collaborated to actually do these first things. But I remember being in the first usability tests and trying to figure out, what were we supposed to do? Nobody knew at that time. And so I ended up doing that. And eventually I got really interested in just making that my career, but I didn't know what it was. So I formed the company that became UIE in the 80s, in the late 80s, and have been delivering that. Wrote the first book on web usability and did a lot of the early seminal research on that, and then have, you know, in the last decade have been focusing on this strategy stuff.
That's absolutely incredible, Jared. So when did it start being called user experience? Because UI means something else.
1993.
1993. Okay.
Don Norman coined the term when he was head of what became user experience at Apple.
Wow, that's incredible. And I'm a former super amateur domainer. I was thrilled to see that you have UIE.com. Did you pick that up in the early 90s?
Yeah,
And
yeah, it
the
was
name was
easy.
just,
I mean,
yeah,
it was
at
three
the time it
random
was.
letters. Nobody else wanted it.
Yeah, that's incredible. That's huge. A three-letter domain these days, incredibly valuable. Just from the domain
Well, if
perspective.
somebody wants to buy it, we will take your millions. So
It'll take a lot to buy that, I'm sure.
yes.
It's a piece of internet history too, with your storied background. Wow,
I
that's
would say
absolutely
every month we get an email asking if we want to sell it, and we say sure, absolutely. How many millions are we talking about? And then I don't hear from them anymore, and that's that.
That's that. Wow, amazing. So let's get a little bit personal. You're married. I've noticed earlier before the call started, and we're on video here, but we're going to have this in a podcast form too. So before the call started, you mentioned your wife.
I do have a wife.
I imagine you had a lot of support going through all of this. Has your wife been there the entire time, or did you have friends, family? What was your support system like as you forged ahead and made these massive innovations in this industry?
Well, this wife I married in 2014.
Oh,
So
congrats.
this is a recent wife,
Oh, wonderful. Good for
but the
you.
best one yet.
Yes, there you go. Congrats.
Uh, my first wife, uh, uh, we were together till 1996, till she passed away. But
Oh, I'm so sorry.
thank you. So she was very supportive. She was a software engineer too. In fact, we met
Oh,
at Digital.
okay.
She was working in the QA department. I was producing code. She was QAing my code, and we had some late nights working on code, and then things just happened. So
That's awesome, Jared. How
yeah,
cool.
yeah,
Well, what a happy experience to have
exactly.
that.
So yeah, basically, she was support in the early years, and my current wife Dana has been supportive. We've been together for since 2007, so she's been supportive for 13 years,
That's
and
amazing.
so
That's so good.
so yeah, and I've had other good friends, and of course, UIE I started in 1988, and I have an amazing team that I've been working with for a long time, and then we started Center in 2016, and merged the two. Actually, we started Center in 2013. We merged the two in 2016. Center was started as a school for UX designers. So we created that because there aren't enough designers in the field. So we created this school to produce more and create folks. And so we're ramping that up now.
That's awesome.
And I have a co-founder of the school who is now, we merged UIE and Center, so they're one company, and she's now the co-CEO of the new company. New as in 2016 versus 1988,
Sure.
and that's Leslie Jensen Inman, and we she's the perfect business partner, and it's just been a fantastic relationship. So that's worked out, and so yeah, that's the
Those are some key people in your
yeah,
life.
they're just been
That's
always,
wonderful.
the key thing is surrounding yourself with people who are smarter than you and more capable than you, and then you just always strive to be better.
Try to live up to their standards. Yes, yes,
Exactly.
I agree. Yeah, I've seen that in my own life. That's absolutely amazing how that support system has been there for you this entire time. Um, let's switch gears really quick, and then we can wrap up with some amazing words of advice from you, if you don't mind, Jared. What
Okay.
sort of hobbies have you developed to escape? Do you have hobbies to escape, or is it so enjoyable that UX is just, it's basically permeates your entire life? I hope you have an escape, because I think everybody needs an escape, but I'd love to hear about yours.
Well, I do a bit of photography.
Oh, you do?
I
What kind?
do. Uh, uh, Point camera at things and take pictures. Is there another kind?
Well,
Uh,
is it like portraiture, nature?
oh,
Uh,
I tend to take pictures. I take a lot of pictures of architecture.
okay.
So if you look at my photographs, um, you'll see lots of pictures of buildings and patterns in buildings. Um,
Interesting.
my wife is always making fun of me because I'll stop and just take a picture of a brick wall because there's something about the pattern of the bricks that I like. She's like, "You've got 30,000 pictures of brick walls," but I don't have this brick wall, right? And so I tend to do a lot of that, some nature stuff, getting better at that.
Mhm.
So that I tend to do that, and then I also do a lot of cooking.
Oh,
I find cooking to be very relaxing. So um, I'm often cooking, and my wife enjoys that very much too, because um, she doesn't cook. Well, I mean, she cooks very well, but because I cook, she doesn't have to, and therefore
Yes.
she sits down and this dinner shows up. And so,
That's wonderful. Do you have a favorite cuisine or type of cuisine that you like to create, I guess, in the kitchen?
no, actually, my new thing is so uh, uh, in um, in 19 no in 2009 my mother passed away. My mother was a master chef,
Oh, wow.
and um, and she happened to be friends with Julia Child, among others. And when she passed away, my father was packing up the house. He ended up going and living with my sister, um, and uh, and so they were packing up her stuff. And my father asked me if I wanted anything from the house he had lived in with my mom for many years, and did I want anything, because he didn't need most of that stuff at my sister's. And so, was there anything I wanted? And I didn't really want very much. And then I thought about it, and I said, I'd love the cookbooks, because my mother had this hutch that had about 30, maybe 40 cookbooks in it.
Mm-hmm.
And in there was a first edition Julia Child that she had signed.
Wow.
And I thought, well, that'd be fun to have. And that would, and the other cookbooks were fun cookbooks. And I thought that would be a nice thing to have of my mother's. And so she said, fine, I'll pack it up. And so my sister actually went down to the house and helped my dad pack. And the next thing I know, 8 giant boxes show up. And I start opening the boxes, and I come to find out that my mother had a secret stash of cookbooks that were not in the hutch in the kitchen, but up in the attic in this special bookshelf. She had been collecting all these regional cookbooks. She and my dad would travel all over the United States, and whenever they would travel, she'd find some church or women's auxiliary or sisterhood cookbook, and she would buy these cookbooks, and they're from all over the country. And
Wow.
and so and because my sister packed up all the cookbooks, she thought, well, Jared's getting all these cookbooks, I'll keep this one. And the one she kept was the Julia Child. So she ended up getting that. I ended up getting all the regional cookbooks. But the regional cookbooks have been an absolute treasure. And so what I've been doing is I've literally been pulling them out at random, and each week trying to make a recipe out of this book.
Wow.
Out of this random book that I selected, just to see what it is. Like, I recently found a cookbook from New Orleans, and I was cooking all this New Orleans cuisine out of this book, because my mother had bought this book. I don't know where she got it or why she got it, but in there was all sorts of stuff that I'd never have and have had, and so I've just been learning to cook all the things out of these regional cookbooks, and it's been a lot of fun. But I gotta tell you, more Swedish meatball recipes than you can shake a stick at.
Oh man, there's
an awful
funny.
lot of hot dish
Huh.
and casseroles and green bean casseroles where you put the fried onions that you buy in a can over them. And oh my gosh, so many recipes that have ketchup and
it's the American way.
Campbell's cream of mushroom soup is the thing that binds this country together. This is what I've learned from reading all these cookbooks.
Oh my goodness, what a true treasure. Wow, Jared, that is such a good story. I love how deeply personal that is for you, and you seem incredibly passionate about that. That's wonderful. I love hearing that, and I love knowing that I'm not the only one that likes to escape from the industry that I'm in. Just to have I mean, I'm sure things percolate in the brain, but it's nice to have something else to do to sort of give your brain that little break. So that's amazing.
Well, so here's the thing. Part of my job, because I run a school and because of the work that we do, is to find all the people who are experts in various aspects of user experience and management and all these things. And as a result, I end up watching lots of videos of presentations.
Mm-hmm.
And I almost always do that while I'm cooking.
Oh,
so while I'm cooking,
multitasking.
instead of having the news or some random TV show on, I have a UX presentation or a management presentation. Last night I was watching Jeremy Keith, who's a British UX designer, talk about progressive disclosure and how to do that with HTML5 and CSS. That's what I was doing while I was making a seasoned riced cauliflower recipe that I'd found. That was absolutely delicious, by the way. It's rice cauliflower tends to be very boring, but this had all sorts of fantastic seasonings in it, and I threw in some extra mushrooms and onions. It was really quite delicious.
Sounds delicious.
That's while I was ricing the cauliflower, I was watching Jeremy Keith talk about this. So this is where if you see me tweet videos, chances are I had just watched that video while I was cooking the night before and thought, oh, this is a video I need to share. It was really good.
So you're pumping that in subconsciously while you're cooking, which activates even more of your brain, which is very cool. What a cool trick and tactic to use. Even if you're escaping a little bit, you're still learning, which I love to do. Learning is one of my personal strengths. So I love that tip. That's awesome. Right. So 2 more questions. Where can we find your photography? You have me intrigued about the patterns. Do you have that in a public place?
So I have a Flickr account.
You do?
Yes. So it's JM Spool.
Okay.
On Flickr, and if you go and look, there's a in Flickr you can have these photo albums, and I have an album called Best Of, and so if you go to the Best Of collection for JM Spool, you'll see photography going back to 2006. Awesome. Hopefully, as it gets more recent, it gets better. I'm hoping. But there's 2,000 or 3,000 pictures in there.
Wow. So, thank you for sharing that. Now, JM Spool is how people can find you elsewhere too. Twitter, LinkedIn.
Right. Yeah, that's the JM Spool. There tends to be no other JM Spools around. There is somebody who goes by JMS Pool. So that I do run into that every so often, but most of the time I'm the only JM Spool around. That's
good. It's good to be unique. Last question, even though that previous question kind of turned into 2, maybe 3. Last question. As we wrap up the show here, do you have any parting words of advice that you would like to share with our listeners on the UX side?
So since your folks are marketers, I would share this. If you are finding it hard to communicate the true benefit and value of the product and service that you're trying to market, if you're having trouble trying to explain why this new thing you've just created, this new release, whatever it is, should be obvious, should be beneficial, then there's a very good chance that you have a user experience issue. And you should rally the troops around and you should say, okay, we need to focus on the user experience of this, because it should be brain dead easy to explain why people need this thing, because the product or service should do all the work for you, right? It should be instantly obvious why this thing is valuable. And if it's not, there's a UX problem. And so you, as the leader of marketing in the organization, can focus the team to stop just delivering outputs and focus on delivering outcomes that are going to change people's lives, make it easy to see why those changes are important, and thereby make your job so much easier so that you can then go cook or do photography or whatever it is that you actually like to do.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jared. Thank you for all of the knowledge that you've shared with us today. This has been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you again.
Well, if you've had half as much fun as I've had, then that means I've had twice as much fun as you.